Blood dripped from the ceiling fan, casting crimson shadows across the living room floor. James Parker stood frozen in the doorway, his briefcase slipping from trembling fingers as the maid's eyes met his. "Stay silent," she mouthed, pressing a finger to her lips. The children were upstairs, and so was something else. Hey everyone, if you're already feeling that chill down your spine, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, what happens next in this story will leave you breathless. James Parker never thought his life would come to this moment. At 38, he'd built a respectable career as an architect while raising 2 children alone after his wife's death 3 years ago. Emma was now 10, a bright-eyed girl who inherited her mother's artistic talent, while 7-year-old Noah was the spitting image of James, curious and determined. The void left by Sarah's passing had been impossible to fill, but James did his best, working long hours to provide while trying to be present for his children. Hiring Lucia had been a necessity, not a luxury. The Ecuadorian woman in her 50s had become more than a housekeeper, she was the steady presence his children needed when work kept him away. Her warm smile and no-nonsense attitude had brought structure back to their home when it felt like everything was falling apart. That Tuesday in October had started like any other. James left for work before dawn, kissing his sleeping children's foreheads before heading to the construction site of his firm's biggest project. The morning meeting had gone well, until his phone buzzed with a text from Lucia, "Come home. Emergency. Don't call. Don't make noise when you arrive." The 20-minute drive home had been the longest of his life. His mind raced through horrifying possibilities, home invasion, kidnapping, or worse. He'd parked a block away as instructed and approached his house from the back, using his key to silently enter through the mudroom. And now here he stood, staring at the blood dripping from his ceiling fan. Lucia's eyes were wide with terror as she crouched behind the kitchen island. She gestured frantically toward the ceiling, then made a walking motion with her fingers. Someone was upstairs with the children. James felt his heart hammering against his ribs. His children, his entire world, were in danger. The protective instinct that had guided him through fatherhood surged through his veins, but Lucia's warning kept him rooted in place. One wrong move could be catastrophic. He inched toward Lucia, careful to avoid the creaking floorboard near the refrigerator. When he reached her, she leaned close to his ear. "2 men," she whispered, her accent thickening with fear. "They came looking for something. Said your wife had it. I told them you were widowed, but they didn't believe me. They're searching upstairs. The children are hiding in the secret space." The secret space, a small concealed room Sarah had insisted on building when they renovated, calling it their panic room. James had thought it excessive at the time, but Sarah, always cautious, had insisted. "Better to have it and never need it than need it and not have it," she'd said. Now, her foresight might save their children's lives. But the blood, whose blood was dripping from his ceiling fan? "They killed the dog," Lucia whispered, answering his unspoken question. "Their German shepherd, Max, who slept at the foot of Noah's bed every night." James felt sick. Heavy footsteps creaked overhead, followed by the sound of drawers being emptied. James's mind raced. What could Sarah have possessed that would bring armed men to their home 3 years after her death? His wife had been a high school art teacher, beloved by students and colleagues alike. There was nothing remarkable about her life, except for how abruptly it had ended. The official report had called it a tragic accident, a single-car crash on a rainy night. James had never questioned it, too consumed by grief and the sudden responsibility of raising 2 children alone. But now, with dangerous men tearing apart his home, he wondered if there had been more to Sarah's story than he knew. A child's muffled cry drifted from upstairs, followed by a harsh male voice. "Shut that kid up or I'll do it myself." James's blood turned to ice. They'd found the children. Without thinking, he reached for the knife block on the counter, but Lucia grabbed his wrist. "No," she mouthed, pulling him toward the basement door instead. She pointed to herself, then upstairs, then made a distracting gesture. She would create a diversion while James circled around. The basement connected to the garage, which had an exterior staircase leading to the second floor. It was their only chance to approach undetected. James nodded, squeezing Lucia's hand in gratitude before slipping through the door. As he crept through the basement, he heard Lucia's voice ring out from the kitchen. "Señors, I found something. Come quickly." James didn't wait to hear their response. He moved swiftly through the garage and up the exterior stairs, praying the old wood wouldn't betray his presence. Rain had begun to fall, muffling his footsteps as he reached the small balcony outside Emma's bedroom. Through the window, he could see a large man in a black jacket holding Emma by the arm. Noah was curled in the corner, tears streaming down his face. The second intruder must have gone downstairs to check Lucia's claim. James had seconds to act. He tested the window, unlocked, thank God, and slid it open just enough to slip through. The man's back was to him, his attention focused on Emma. "Tell me where your mother's files are, and I won't hurt your brother," the man was saying, his voice eerily calm. Emma's eyes darted to the window, widening when she saw her father. To her credit, she didn't react beyond a slight tremble in her voice. "I don't know what you're talking about. My mom died a long time ago." James moved silently across the room, grabbing the heavy ceramic lamp from Emma's desk. The man must have sensed something because he started to turn, but it was too late. James brought the lamp down with all his strength, catching the intruder on the temple. The man crumpled, his gun clattering to the floor. "Daddy!" Noah launched himself into James's arms while Emma kicked the gun under the bed. "Shoo," James whispered, holding them close for just a moment before reality intruded. "Where's the other man?" "Downstairs," Emma whispered. "He went to check something Lucia found." A scream from below answered his question. "Lucia!" "Hide," James ordered, retrieving the fallen man's gun. "Back in the panic room. Don't come out until I call the safe word." Their family code, blueberry pancakes, Sarah's Sunday morning specialty. The children disappeared into the hidden panel in the closet while James secured the unconscious intruder with belts from his closet. Then he moved toward the stairs, gun held awkwardly in hands that had never fired a weapon. The scene in the kitchen made his blood run cold. The second intruder had Lucia pinned against the wall, a knife at her throat. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. "Where is he?" the man demanded. "I know he came home." James stepped into view, the gun raised. "Let her go." The intruder spun, using Lucia as a shield. He was younger than James had expected, maybe 30, with cold eyes and a surgical precision to his movements that suggested military training. "James Parker," the man said, almost pleasantly. "We've been waiting for you. Where are your wife's files?" "My wife has been dead for 3 years, James said, struggling to keep the gun steady. "I don't know what files you're talking about." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The ones she stole before her accident. The ones she was planning to take to the press." Ring any bells? It didn't. Sarah had never mentioned any files, any secrets. She taught art to teenagers and painted landscapes on weekends. What could she possibly have known that would get her killed? "I don't know what you're talking about," James repeated. "But I do know you have 5 seconds to let my housekeeper go before I put a bullet in you." The man laughed. "You won't shoot. You might hit her. Besides, you've never fired a gun in your life, have you, Mr. Architect?" He was right. James had no idea if he could make the shot, and he couldn't risk Lucia's life. But he had to do something. "Sarah never told me about any files," James said, trying to buy time. "Whatever she knew died with her." Something flickered in the intruder's eyes, doubt, perhaps. "Check your attic," he said. The real attic, not the finished space. Behind the insulation in the northwest corner. That's where she would have hidden them. James frowned. How would this stranger know the layout of his house? Unless... You've been here before, he realized aloud. When we weren't home. The man's smile widened. Many times. We've been very patient, Mr. Parker. But our employer's patience has run out. A sudden crash from upstairs, the first intruder must have regained consciousness. The momentary distraction was all Lucia needed. She drove her elbow into her captor's ribs with surprising strength, then ducked as James fired the gun. The shot went wide, shattering the kitchen window, but it was enough to make the intruder release Lucia. She scrambled away as the man lunged for James, knife extended. James had never been in a real fight, but years of roughhousing with his son had taught him something about momentum. He sidestepped at the last moment, using the man's forward motion to send him crashing into the refrigerator. The gun flew from James's hand, sliding under the stove. The intruder recovered quickly, spinning with the knife. James grabbed the nearest weapon, a cast iron skillet still soaking in the sink, and swung it with all his might. The heavy pan connected with the man's wrist, sending the knife clattering to the floor. But the intruder was trained for this. He drove his fist into James's stomach, then followed with a blow to the jaw that sent him staggering backward. James tasted blood as he fell against the kitchen island. The man retrieved his knife, advancing slowly now. This could have been easy, he said. All we wanted were the files. James glanced desperately around the kitchen, looking for anything he could use as a weapon. His eyes landed on the pressure cooker on the stove, Lucia's beef stew, still hot from dinner preparation. With a surge of adrenaline, James lunged for the cooker, ripping off the lid and flinging the contents at his attacker. The man screamed as the scalding stew hit his face and chest, giving James the opening he needed. He tackled the blinded intruder, driving him to the floor with enough force to knock the wind from his lungs. Lucia appeared at his side, pressing a kitchen knife into his hand. The children, she gasped. The other man. A gunshot from upstairs cut her off. James froze, his entire world narrowing to that single sound. Not his children. Please, not his children. Heavy footsteps on the stairs. James rose to meet whatever was coming, knife in hand, prepared to die protecting what remained of his family. But it wasn't the first intruder who appeared in the doorway. It was Detective Michael Chen, his service weapon drawn, his familiar face grim beneath the badge. James, he said, lowering his gun slightly. Are you hurt? James stared at his old friend in confusion. Mike? How? Lucia called me, the detective said, nodding toward the housekeeper. Not 9/11. Me directly. Smart woman. Lucia's hands were shaking as she showed James her phone. I texted him when I texted you. I knew these men were not ordinary thieves. Relief washed over James, followed immediately by panic. The children are safe, Chen assured him. The guy upstairs won't be bothering anyone for a while. My partner's with him now. He glanced at the man on the kitchen floor, who was moaning in pain from his burns. Looks like you handled this one yourself. James sagged against the counter, the adrenaline draining from his body. Mike, they said Sarah had files. That her accident wasn't an accident. Something flickered across the detective's face, recognition, or perhaps concern. Let's get your kids and get you all somewhere safe. Then we'll talk. An hour later, they sat in Chen's living room, the children asleep in the guest bedroom after being checked by a paramedic. Lucia's forehead had been bandaged, and she sat quietly sipping tea while James tried to process everything that had happened. The men were professionals, Chen explained, keeping his voice low. Ex-military, working for a private security firm with some questionable clients. We've been tracking them for months in connection with several break-ins targeting former employees of North Star Pharmaceuticals. James frowned. Sarah never worked for a pharmaceutical company. She was a teacher. Her brother did, Chen said gently. Thomas Reeves. He was a research scientist at North Star until 3 years ago, when he supposedly committed suicide. 2 weeks before your wife's accident. The room seemed to tilt beneath James. Thomas, Sarah's brilliant, troubled brother. They'd been close once, but had drifted apart in the years before Sarah's death. James had attributed it to Thomas's struggles with depression, never suspecting there might be more to the story. What was he researching? James asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Chen hesitated. A new pain medication. Preliminary trials showed severe side effects, including heart failure in some patients. Thomas was pushing to halt the trials, but the company had millions invested. They buried his reports and fast-tracked FDA approval. And Sarah knew, James whispered, the pieces falling into place. Thomas must have given her evidence. Chen nodded. We think so. After Thomas died, several of his colleagues reported break-ins. Nothing valuable taken, just computers and files. Then they started having accidents. Car crashes, home invasions gone wrong, apparent suicides. James felt sick. And I never questioned it. All this time. You couldn't have known, Lucia said softly, reaching for his hand. Sarah protected you by keeping you in the dark. But why wouldn't she tell me? James demanded, anger mixing with grief. I could have helped her. She was protecting the children, Chen said. And you. If you didn't know anything, you couldn't be a target. Except they had become targets anyway. The thought of his children hiding in the panic room while armed men searched for them made James's blood boil. We need to find those files, he said firmly. The man mentioned the attic, the northwest corner, behind the insulation. Chen nodded. We'll check it first thing tomorrow. For tonight, you all stay here. I've got officers watching the house, and more coming to secure yours. James stared into his coffee, seeing Sarah's face in his mind. Had she known she was in danger that rainy night? Had she been afraid in her final moments? If we find the files, he said quietly, what happens then? Chen's expression was grim. We build a case. These people have money and power, James. It won't be easy. But we'll have proof, James insisted. We can stop them. Yes, Chen agreed. If the files contain what we think they do, we can stop them from hurting anyone else. The next morning, they found exactly what the intruder had described, a waterproof case hidden behind the insulation in James's attic. Inside were USB drives, printed documents, and a letter addressed to James in Sarah's handwriting. My darling, it began. If you're reading this, something has happened to me. I'm so sorry for the secrets I've kept. Thomas came to me with evidence that North Star falsified data on their new drug, Nurofen. People are dying, James. I couldn't stay silent. I've made copies of everything and arranged for them to go to the right people if anything happens to me. Keep our babies safe. I love you always, Sarah. The evidence was damning. Internal emails discussing the suppression of negative trial results, falsified data, and most disturbing of all, a list of problem employees who had raised concerns, with Thomas's name at the top, followed by dates. Many of those dates corresponded with deaths or accidents. In the weeks that followed, James's world transformed. Chen's team built a case against North Star executives and the security firm they'd hired to silence whistleblowers. The FBI became involved. Arrests were made. Through it all, James focused on helping his children heal from the trauma they'd experienced. Emma had nightmares about the men in their house. Noah became afraid of the dark. But slowly, with therapy and time, they began to feel safe again. Lucia stayed with them, her presence a constant comfort as they rebuilt their sense of security. 6 months after the break-in, James sat on the back porch watching.